What's up, guys? How's it going? We're going back on our miracles today. Our next miracle that we're going to talk about in the New Testament that from Jesus's ministry is found in Matthew 14, the very end, last two or three verses of Matthew 14. And this is really easy. Like by the time you get to this point, this is super easy. Like you could skip over this if you read it and you might not even recognize it was there. You're like, oh, Jesus is doing a lot of miracles. We've already read about a lot of miracles. He's doing a bunch more. So I like this because it's easy to skip over otherwise, I feel, because so many remarkable things. And in these verses, he's just saying like, a bunch of other people got healed, blah, blah, blah. But it's still crazy freaking miraculous. So we're going to Matthew. It's also Mark. We're sticking with Matthew today. 34, Matthew 14, starts out, and when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret or something. Gennesaret? So it's sort of, I don't know how it's pronounced. That's on the western side of the Sea of Galilee. So that's where we've been hanging out these last few miracles. So they came into that land. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, Jesus, they sent out into all the country round about and brought unto him all that were diseased. So I really like that. So when the people there in that town, Matthew says the men, Luke, Mark doesn't, I don't think he says man. He just says everyone, like, word got out. Either way, I really like how when Jesus is there, they told everybody about it. They told everyone to come to Jesus and be healed. And obviously, that is something that we should be doing today. Telling people that they can come be healed with Jesus. It's definitely no different. I take it back. It is different. It is different because I think if my missionary efforts to spread the good word about Jesus would be intensified if he was at the park by my house and he was waiting for people to be healed and I could go find people and whoever I brought would be healed. Man, I'd be going nonstop trying to bring people to Jesus, which I should be doing anyway. So Jesus gets to the area, people go out and they're telling everyone, like, bring your diseased, bring people who need to be healed to Jesus to be healed. So he gets there, and I love that. I think if I saw Jesus at the park or wherever, I wouldn't want to leave. I'd just be like, just listening, like whatever, like, I don't know, whatever he said, I'd want to listen. It would be hard to leave listening to Jesus. But I also see like, this is a way for so many people to be healed. So I think that if you had like true love, you'd go find people to bring. Last verse of 14, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment, and as many as touched were made perfectly whole. So they went out and told everybody to come be healed of Jesus. And it sounds like, from how I read it, they asked these people to touch the hem of his garment. I thought, that's fascinating. Why are they telling him just to touch the hem of his garment? Now, we've done like 20 other miracles that we reviewed, and Jesus has cured people from all sorts of different ways. Some he's touched, some he's just commanded to be healed, some he's been far away, like all sorts of different ways he's been healing people. It's crazy. And as I understand it, from my reading, it looks like there's only one time where we have that woman who was healed by touching the hem of Jesus's robe or clothing or garment or whatever. She touched that, and that was her goal. Remember that? She's like, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to be made whole. So she did, and she was made whole. Here, it sounds like people are telling them, just touch his hem. Maybe like, don't bother him. Like maybe don't don't touch his face or something. Like, just touch the end of his robe and you'll be healed. And I thought that was interesting when we did the miracle with the woman who was healed in the similar manner. The only other time that I've seen that this has happened. To me, it seems like she was just like, okay, I'm here and I know Jesus can heal me. Jesus is here. I'm over here. I don't have enough faith to be healed here, but I know that if I get close to Jesus, try to get that in the camera. If I get close to Jesus, I'll be healed. I need to close that gap from wherever I am. I need to travel, find Jesus so I can touch the hem of his garment. I don't need to touch him physically. I don't need to touch his hand or whatever. I just need to touch his clothing. If I can just touch his clothing even, that's close enough for me to have the faith to be healed. And I think that's where her faith was. And part of me thinks that maybe the people in this story heard about the woman who was healed from that touch. And they're like, okay, everyone, line up. We're just going to touch his clothing and we're going to be healed. Which is a great thing. But it got me thinking, like, that's kind of weird. Like, what's the big deal? Why are they touching his clothing? This is the second time that happened. Now, it seems like we have no idea. Someone probably does. I have no idea how many people were healed. 300,000. I have no idea how many people were healed. But it seems like quite a few were healed. But I don't know how many. As many as touched. So as many as did it were healed. It's hard to know how many, but everyone who did it, they were healed. And I thought that's kind of curious. So I started Googling, and Google, recently they have you can always Google. For a long time, you've been able to Google something and get an answer. Now you can Google and it gives you like the AI message up top. That little AI thing has actually been able to provide a lot of really good answers for me personally in my scripture study, because it'll scour different websites and pop out an answer for you. And it's fascinating. And that little AI, machine, it can give you some pretty good answers. So I started reading it and I found a ton more. And we're going to breeze over this. You could spend a long darn time looking at how amazing this miracle is that we breeze over. It is incredible, and we can breeze over it. And I think we often do. We probably breeze over a lot of them because there's so many miracles. But when you start looking at the different words that are used and their original meaning in the original text and the Jewish culture and what different things meant, holy cow, it is fascinating. Apparently, so we're gonna talk about a couple other scriptures, and I think I've mentioned before that if you had know anyone that talks about Jesus's miracles or religious history or anything, pretty much anyone is gonna know more than me. You'll get more information from anyone more than me. I'm not an historian or a scriptorian or a whatever. I'm just some dude without hair that likes learning about Jesus and sharing it. So this is way more for me than it is for you guys, for sure. Anyway, so I started looking. And the hem isn't just a hem. On the edge of a robe or clothing would be little tassels. These tassels had a lot of meaning in the culture back then, and I'm going to read Numbers 15. I know you don't go to Numbers very often. I don't. I've read the Bible all the way through a couple times. Numbers isn't the most thrilling, riveting book there is, but we're going end of chapter 15 in Numbers. We'll go to 38. speak on the children of Israel, blah, 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 that they may make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, that they may put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. So they're putting little blue ribbon and tassels on the end of the garments. And it shall be unto you for a fringe, that you may look upon it. Okay, this is where it gets cool. So I've got my little Jesus guy here, and I'm thinking about like his robe. I don't know what he was wearing, but this is what I picture. Got this in Denmark from the original Christus statue. It's freaking amazing. Anyway, total sidetrack. So this is what I picture. Jesus wearing something like this, but on the end, there's probably fringes, like little tassels or something on the end of the garment. And when you look at these little tassels, remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that ye seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which ye use to go a whoring. Always makes me giggle when they say whoring in the scriptures. But before that, remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them. Down 40, that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy unto your God. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. If you're not sure who he is the Lord your God. And he mentions that like 3 times in those verses. But those tassels on the clothing are there to help them remember the commandments and do them. In 40, remember and do all my commandments and be holy. So he says, remember to do the commandments, obey them, do the commandments, remember them, do them. 40 adds be holy. So these tassels are there to help the people remember to be holy, which I think is amazing. So it's not just a fashion statement like, oh, these tassels are rad. It's more of a symbolic thing. These are here to help us remember the commandments. Help us remember to do the commandments. And from what I've read, it sounds like I really like a quote here that says the tassels and that edge, that border of the garments is a physical representation of Jewish commitment to live a life of holiness. I love that. A physical representation of a Jewish commitment to live a life of holiness. Those tassels are there on the clothing to help us remember to live a life of holiness. Now, I found that quote, I really like that quote, and I found it remarkably similar to quotes we have in my own religion, because I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and strongly believe in Jesus Christ. Obviously, doing this series on the miracles of Jesus Christ, looking at how we can draw closer to him. But in my church, when we go to the temple and worship, just like back in the day, go to the temple and worship, we also have an undergarment. And I'm sure if you're watching this, if you've heard about our religion, you've heard about our undergarment. And the undergarment that we wear is used almost the exact same description as those tassels. Physical representation of our commitment to live a life of holiness. That's why we wear those. It's to remind us of the commandments and remind us to obey the commandments, and a physical representation, which I also like. I think that's also why a lot of people wear crosses. That cross is also a physical representation of our commitment to live a life of holiness. That's why I wear my garments from my religion. That's why I often wear a cross, is because I feel that is a physical representation of my beliefs. It is a reminder of our dedication to follow Jesus Christ. And I love it. And Yeah, I know you can make the argument like, I don't need that. I remember Jesus anyway. Well, that's fantastic. I could use some help. I like having the help. I like having the reminder um, of the cross, of promises I've made with Jesus, and I really like that. So I love that those tassels represent that. Those tassels, you can read about these tassels like it's fascinating, and the more you read, you're like, this is crazy. This makes perfect sense. So we're not just touching clothing or trying to get close or whatever. It's not like I missed the robe and I hit a shoelace and I'm healed. Like there's a reason they're going for the tassel, and it's because it is like part of that person. It is part of that their holiness and their commitment. And from what I've read, it sounds like the higher up, if you're a Pharisee or a Sadducee, you're a very important person in the religion. Like you're gonna have bigger tassels and maybe they're gold or whatever. Like the tassels are gonna change and grow and be more ornate as you go up in the religion, which I think is so interesting. Also in Malachi 4, 2, I think. So it's kind of cool because Malachi in my Bible, it's just like the page before Matthew. It's like one page before, but it was a long time before Matthew. Anyway, but unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise. Okay, the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings. Now you can read more about this. Also, Google it. That AI will hook you up. But that phrase, healing in his wings, has reference to those same tassels and the same garment of clothing. And you can read in the Old Testament, there's multiple times where there's stories. We're already going along. There's lots of stories where they use like the corner of the garment covers someone. And it talks about the corner of the garment. And in this case, it uses the same words in the ancient text as the corner of the garment covering someone would also be symbolic of wings for that person. So we're using the same words here to describe this. But healing in his wings makes reference to these tassels, which I think is fascinating. So there's so much symbolic nature behind these tassels, which I love. And reading more about this, you're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. It makes sense why of any article of clothing, and maybe even more importantly than touching his hand or giving him a hug or something, like touching those tassels is symbolic of his position and maybe his holiness, his keeping the commandments. If they can touch that tassel, that is has much more symbolic nature involved than I knew before I started reading this. And like I said, my first video was super long, so I try and do more videos without doing as much in depth. But this miracle is super short, so I was like, I gotta study more. I gotta figure out what they're doing. There's something going on here, and there certainly is. And it's so cool learning about how that tassel is important. And I think about like in our day in different religions, if people talk about if I can meet the prophet or the apostle or the leader of the church or the pope, if I can get to that person, if I can kiss the ring, and not so much the person, but the ring. It's very symbolic of that position and that power. And I think that's the same. Again, as we talked about in pretty much every miracle, it's by our faith that we are healed. And I think that that is a natural thing for people to have faith in, is those tassels. And I love it. And I think that we too will be healed when we find that thing that we have enough faith in. And if we're not being healed, maybe it's not time yet, but maybe we just don't have the faith. Maybe we aren't that close yet. Maybe we need to find what that tassel will be in our life. Thanks for watching.